Hello everyone, welcome to the Weekly Guest Podcast. My name is Edward Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here again today. Thank you for taking time out to listen. On this week's podcast, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Sophia Bergqvist. Sophia Bergqvist is a shareholder and part owner of Quinta de la Rosa. Welcome, Sophia. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much. I'm very privileged to be here with you today.
Thank you. Now then, Sophia, you are General Manager of Quinta de la Rosa, which is a vineyard and guest house in the Douro Valley in Portugal. Can you tell us a little bit more about Quinta de la Rosa and what you provide and the services that you offer?
Yeah, Quinta de la Rosa is a vineyard that was given to my grandmother over 100 years ago as a christening present. My great-grandfather was a port shipper, but unfortunately he went bankrupt in the 1930s. So from the 1930s to 1988, we used to grow grapes, and those grapes were sold to Sandeman, who made them into port wine. In 1988, rather crazily, myself and my father decided to start making our own port. We made our own port in the late 80s, and then in the early 90s, we were one of the first people to make red wine from grape varieties, from port grape varieties. So we now are a port, wine, olive oil producer, and we were also one of the first people to start taking tourism quite seriously in the Douro Valley. We started by renting one of our houses on the vineyard. We now have 14 guest rooms that we rent out on a bed and breakfast and dinner basis, and we have 2 houses that we rent out in the middle of the vineyard, all with their own swimming pools. So the business has gradually expanded over the last 20 or so years.
Now, you said rather crazily since 1998. Why do you say crazily then?
Because I don't think anyone should seriously think about buying a vineyard and going into the wine business. It's not a business to make money. It's much more a business of love, passion, and madness. I remember when I first started, I did a cash flow forecast, and in about 5 years, I saw that I'd be making a bit of money. The idea of making money in this business is quite a challenge. Any money, any spare cash you have is always reinvested, be it in the vineyard or in the winemaking facilities. And my 5-year cash flow forecast, where I would get payback after 5 years, disappeared pretty quickly.
Surely it must be extended now.
Yes, but basically, a vineyard means that you actually sit on an increasing asset value, but actually the return on asset is quite difficult. So I don't make huge profits, but I am sitting on an increasingly valuable vineyard. So who cares, as long as I can just about pay everybody and myself.
Good. Now, Quinta de la Rosa is a family-run business with you as the main family member running the business. Has it been hard trying to establish yourself within the wine industry?
Particularly in the port industry, because wine and port are very different. So port is a very traditional product. It's very branded, rather like champagne. So people who are buying a bottle of port will probably buy a name they've heard of, because they don't buy port very often. People buying wine, strangely enough, when you think about it, there's much more competition in the wine business because there are many, many more countries in the world that make wine. Port can only be made in Portugal. And so despite the fact that it's more competitive, it's actually easier to sell wine when your name isn't quite so well known.
Now, in recent years, on the accommodation side, you mentioned there's been some expansion. Is this the result of a resurgence of interest in the Douro Valley? Recently I heard that CNN had made a broadcast about the Douro Valley as being one of Europe's most idyllic secrets.
Yes, I'm very pleased that CNN said that, because we want the secret to be more widely known. There is no doubt about it that every year that there's more and more tourists coming to this region. In the past, there were very, very few hotel beds. I don't know what the actual number of hotel beds are now. And it is interesting to see that quite a few people are either expanding in luxury hotels or also on a kind of vineyard basis. But you have to remember, if you go to places like California or Australia, there are a lot of vineyards who also offer accommodation. And I think one links in very well with another.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the vineyard and the wines and ports you offer at Quinta de la Rosa? I've recently moved towards veganism myself and understand that your wines and ports are perhaps suitable for vegans or vegetarians.
No, absolutely. I mean, we offer a full range of ports and also red, white, and rosé wines. And what we are is we're very careful about trying to limit any interference in the production of these wines. So some people will use gelatine to actually clear any sediment out. And obviously, gelatines can be based on animal products. Other people would also use egg whites to help clear any of this fine sediment. What we use we use basically forms of filters. So we actually try to make sure that our wines are available for everybody, including vegans and vegetarians.
Fantastic. Now, the setting of Quinta de la Rosa is truly amazing, with vineyards above the house and the river below, with some generally all-round beautiful scenery as far as the eyes can see. The setting would certainly encourage guests in forgetting about the outside world. Would you find that as a result your guests do not tend to stray too far away?
Well, you're quite right. We often get guests who come here and think, we haven't got very much to do because we don't have, the cultural attractions of Florence or Siena at our doorstep. But actually what happens is people come here and they just sit and they soak up the view, and you find that all of their plans to go and visit Mattea's Palace or whatever tend to evaporate. They just would rather sit overlooking the river, go on small river trips and sip white port and tonic.
Fantastic. Now, there's a lot of history and tradition at Quinta de la Rosa, with some vineyards in use since before World War I. But you are also a winery that is able to adapt to ensure that top quality products are produced. For example, your winemaker, George Moreira, has been with the winery for about 10 years, would you say? That having this loyalty and continuity assists with the winery's continual growth.
No, absolutely. I think if you find anybody who's good, it's very, very important to keep them. And George is undoubtedly one of the best winemakers, or I would say the best winemaker in Portugal. And you do need time to be able to understand the terroir and the type of wines and ports that each little vineyard produces. So when you find someone who's good, you definitely want to keep hold of them. And the vineyards, by the way, have been actually here since Roman times. There are indications that Romans grew grapes here, and so some of them are very, very ancient.
Now, we've also mentioned ports. Quinta de la Rosa produces ports, and unlike other port producers, everything is produced on site, with the storage vats at La Rosa being in use for more than 100 years. Being in control of the whole port producing process must be a major way in increasing the credibility of the port that you produce. Would you say that this is the case? Are your ports well regarded? I understand you've won a number of awards.
They are very well regarded, and we are in many leading Michelin-star restaurants in London and globally, and we also have got some very good ratings from many famous magazines, from Wine Spectator to Decanter magazine. So that is very important. But to make good ports requires a lot of different elements. So you need to have the good vineyards, and they are classified from A to F. So we've got the good vineyards. You need to have a good winemaker. You need to make sure that you've got the right distribution. You need to make sure you've got the right image, the right packaging. So it's a whole mixture of things that you've got to be able to work at in order to get your name and reputation out there.
Now, currently, what is the market reach of the ports and wines you produce? You mentioned globally. How far do you export? How hard is it to engage new importers? Is it more of a case that they come to find you?
Well, it's a mixture of both, actually. As one becomes more famous, I'm finding that more and more people do approach me, which is very nice. I work on an exclusive basis in each country with an importer. And I must say I'm pretty much covered in most of the leading wine import markets. So we sell from the US through to Brazil. I've just received my first order from Peru and from Mexico this month, all the way across the world via Sri Lanka to Hong Kong, Macau, China, Australia, and even New Zealand. So it is, we do have a kind of a global reach, I guess. It is hard to engage new importers if you haven't got a brand name, but fortunately now we've got so many good awards behind us. I find that people are much more interested in looking at us.
Now, La Rosa apparently has a great diversity of terroir and microclimate, enabling the best blends to be made with the vineyards of differing aspects and altitude. What is the significance of having the vineyards growing on the mountainside? Is it common for vineyards and wine producers? And does it have a particular effect on what is being produced?
La Rosa has a great diversity in terroir, as you mentioned, and it is very important because you need to have different blends and different lots to make your final blend very good. And if our vineyards, for instance, are south-facing rather than slightly higher up and north-facing, it means that you get different types of wines produced from both of them. A north-facing vineyard will give you greater freshness and acidity, rather than the south-facing vineyard will give you greater fruit and kind of richness. So it's very important that there is a diversity. If we had our vineyards at all the same level and with very little change, we would find that our wines wouldn't be so interesting and complex, I guess.
Now, your grapes are ranked quite highly by the Casa do Douro. Are wines from this area, and as a consequence of the Casa do Douro's ranking, highly regarded within the winemaking industry?
I wish they were. Unfortunately, most people don't know about the Casa do Douro ranking. Vineyards in the Douro Valley are ranked A to F, and we are all A graded, rather like Premier Grand Cru or whatever. The French appellation classifications are by far better known than the ones from the Douro Valley. So even though we do have some of the best grapes, and they are classified by the Casa do Douro, most people have never heard of the classification.
Now, what are the types, or who are the types of clients and customers you would like to meet then?
What, in general? I mean, final customers, or I have different levels of customers. So I have customers who are my importers, and I have customers who are shops and sommeliers, and then I have my final customers who actually enjoy drinking the product. They're obviously the most important, but I can't meet all my final customers.
Yes.
So I usually rely on my importer and the sommeliers and the wine merchants to do their job in telling everybody how wonderful my wines and ports are.
Fantastic. Now, what does the future hold for you and Quinta de la Rosa, Sophia?
Well, I hope that gradually wines from the Douro will become better known. We are definitely a relatively new wine-growing region. I also hope that ports will become more popular. At the moment, I think people don't realise how wonderful a good port is, and ports tend to have a rather kind of old-fashioned image. So I'm hoping that there's a great future in terms of the wine and ports. I also hope there's a great future for the tourism. We've just, as you mentioned earlier, expanded our rooms and we've upgraded them to quite a high level. And within a few months, we're seeing a huge result of this investment and many more tourists visiting us. So I'm positive. I think the future is very good for Quinta de la Rosa. I think the future for Portugal in general is probably a little bit more complicated.
Lastly, Sophia, what piece of advice would you give to someone starting out in business?
If they're starting a new business, I would say think again. I think you have to really make sure that you have enough money behind you, because like any form of project, it's always going to cost you twice as much at least than what you estimate. I also think you need to have a huge amount of energy and passion, I think you have to really love what you're doing, because that makes a big difference. I think if you're only half-hearted about it right at the beginning, you're not going to be able to kind of continue it through, because it's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun.
Thank you. So, thank you, Sophia. It's all from me, Edward Daniel, as bye from Sophia Bergqvist.
Come and I encourage anyone listening to come and visit the Duros.
Thank you. Have a terrific week.
Thanks a lot. Bye.